seen something like me.
Hello, everyone. And today we're joined by Simon Mills. He's a bit of a franchise legend, I'd say. I got to know Simon first in a mentoring capacity, and that was probably, 3 or 4 years ago now?
We met in March 2019.
Fantastic.
No. November 2019.
It was memorable for Simon.
Paddington Hilton.
Paddington Hilton. So, Simon, thanks for joining us on the Walk with Wolfinch today.
Thank you, Amrit.
Simon, I wonder if you can start with a little recap of your experience. I mean, it's really quite impressive what you've done. I mean, I was immediately drawn to your pitch. I got to say, your elevator pitch was just sublime. But over to you.
Over to me. So I started Amrit as a franchisee in 1991, and I did that for 4 or 5 years, and then I joined the main franchisor, and we went international. We went into 12 countries.
Wow.
And we've probably had about 250 franchisees supplying 27,000 retail stores.
27,000.
27,000. So we were in the States, we were in Australia, most of the European countries, Brazil, places like that. Yeah. So that was my experience.
Unbelievable. And I think what I've found working with you is that the integrity that you've got with franchising and ethical franchising, I think, it's a really interesting thing because it's very different in the US to the UK. I think we've got some really wonderful franchisors here, and the BFA do a really excellent job. But it's just a way of life in the US, isn't it? I mean, we were having this conversation last night.
Yeah, we talked about it last night. I think, and I'm sure the statistics show, but American families might move 4 or 5 times. So there's a real need for them to have the same services or restaurants or hotels in the different cities because they don't have that same community. So obviously franchising started, I think in the 1850s in the US. Singer sewing machines. Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Okay. And so, I mean, I have had you as a guide, and I've got to say, so many important decisions that I've made throughout my franchising career. I was a franchisor, but as a franchisee, it's very different, and as a franchisor, it's a whole new kettle of fish. And you've been really integral to my growth as well, personally. And I wonder if you could share a couple of things that you've seen over the span of your career that make a successful franchisee, or the common mistakes that new franchisees tend to make.
Okay, so it's a lovely question. I think new franchisees, well, I think it's really believing in your own, having faith in your own abilities.
Yeah.
So many times I'm asked, will it work? Will this work? Will that work? And it's all about growth mindset.
Yeah.
I think if you believe in your own abilities and you're in the right sector, because you've got to love the sector.
That's true. Yeah.
If you're in the right sector, it will work. But then it's also being a lifelong learner, being accepting that the franchise will change during the course, things will change, and you have to roll with that.
Yeah.
But that's the growth mindset.
Yeah, and that's so true. I suppose with any business, that's a growth mindset is the key thing.
Is it? Yeah.
And what about franchisors? I mean, we are quite fortunate in the UK that there's this sort of new flurry of franchisors that are really interested in putting information out for other franchisors. If you look at the likes of Teslom and Ed Pinnell and podcasts that they're doing and all that. But what would you say to all the franchisors out there that are either new franchisors that are getting into the market, or even established franchisors? I mean, what would be the one sort of key thing that you'd say, look, don't do this and definitely do that?
Well, that's again a lovely question. What would I say about that? I would say, going back to your first point, which is about people sharing best practice. Obviously, I was lucky enough to do 4 years in the States, and the IFA do a lovely job hosting the conference there, or the convention, and people are going to share best practice with you. And I think that's something that the new generation are much better at. People don't. People will share about their failures, will share about opportunities, and it's kind of very mutually supportive. I think the biggest, and then you talk about the biggest failure point with franchisors is obviously choosing the wrong franchisees, and then not taking responsibility for that, not learning from it, not doing enough due diligence, not having enough financing in place for themselves, because it's a longer. I think Martin Mendelsohn always said it's it's a long, scalable business, and you need to have a good amount of franchisees to make it work. It can't work on, 5, 10, 15 units.
Yeah,
it has to be kind of 50 plus to make it work.
And is that the number that you think in the UK? Because I know when I was at the US Emerging Franchisor Conference in Nashville year before last, the number that was batted around in the US is 100. And that is obviously because the travel and so on, and to get to royalty sufficiency. What would you say that number is in the UK?
I think the harder answer is it will depend by industry. But 40 to 50 has to be the magic one. It depends on management support fee, and it depends on depends on the industry. But also you need that you kind of need an in-house marketing team. You need all that extra support in-house to make it work.
And you've got some really amazing brands in the UK, haven't you? I mean, I was really lucky to have a drink with Trevor Brocklebank at the last BFA annual conference, and he was talking to me about his journey and about his startup, and he spoke at the conference actually, and he was talking about how painful the beginning is, and you resonate so much because actually in those early years where you're just plowing money in, plowing effort in, it's really quite brutal, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's one of the big things of, are you ready for it? Because let's say you've been a landscape gardening business, and you've got, let's say, 5 or 6 vans, and then you decide to franchise, and then you suddenly got this whole new world to understand of not managing employees, but working with. Because no one likes to be managed if they put their own investment in. And then you suddenly got to learn this whole different skill set, which is not telling people how to do it. It's really motivating them. It's all about heart, and it's all about culture, and it's all about values, which people talk about, but rarely kind of follow through.
It's very true, isn't it? I mean, it's all heart and minds, isn't it? I mean,
hearts and minds.
And that's something that I've nicked off you actually. But it's so true.
Well,
I didn't understand it when we first started talking about it.
No, exactly. And because people are putting their life savings in, so every decision. It's the biggest decision they're going to make. It's not like even buying a house or a car. It's actually where they're leaving. They're leaving what they're doing in a very secure job. Though I have to say, more and more, since I've been in franchising, I started in '91. There's less permanent jobs anymore.
I mean, it's that job for life thing is.
We're always kind of 30 days away from doing something else. So I think that's gone. So this is still the only industry where you have real kind of independence too. It's the only job you can't get fired from, right?
I mean, that is very true. I think when I was a franchisee, the reason I joined the franchise network was that support bit, because I didn't know anything about home care and the compliance and so on. But also it was like, well, what the hell else am I going to do, right? I'm not going to go and get a job because I had started running a business, and you therefore think, well, okay, gosh, you want something scalable, but you need something that works for you and isn't going to be something that ends in 5 minutes, where like a job or a sort of retail type business that you haven't really kind of cottoned on to. I think the beautiful thing about franchising is the system that it provides. And so what do you think are the kind of key things that a system needs to have? I mean, talking unit level economics and so on.
Yeah, I think a system needs to evolve. So I think you need a franchisor that's always looking around the corner.
Yeah.
It's always the great story of how McDonald's were late on the scene with coffee. Their franchisees were asking for it. So you need to be with a franchisor that's thinking about technology, thinking about the changes. And when you're a business owner, let's say as an independent, rarely can you do that because you're in the weeds running the business. So you want to be with a franchisor that has a vision. Is young in terms of attitude and thinking, and is looking for the next thing to protect your business. I also think there's also that you're building up an asset, and so many businesses are built on one person doing it, or and obviously a franchise has the brand behind it. So you'd hope that when you exit the franchise, that there's a decent asset that you can sell on to somebody else.
And is there a sort of a number that comes into mind in general, whether it's retail or services, in terms of resale values that you've seen?
It will depend on, I mean, obviously, you know, you're in home care, Amrit. I think in home care it will vary from, you know, 1.5, 2 to say 3, 3.5, 3.7, depending on times EBITDA. So the, you know, the long definition of EBITDA, whatever that be. And so I think, you know, in things like tax assist, in some of those, I think it's by turnover and stuff like that. So, but you're creating an asset, which is something you're not going to do in a job working for somebody.
Well, it's actually quite amazing, really. I was 26 when I bought a franchise, sold it 4 or 5 years later, and was able to buy a house in London, which basically would just never have happened otherwise, right? You know, and you can keep ploughing away at something, and it just doesn't get there. So it's really quite interesting, I think. You know, it's when you're looking at the value it can add, and actually, someone from any age, any background, any experience, as long as they're the right personality.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what I love about franchising. It is open to all.
Yeah.
And, you know, as long as you're there with a good ethical franchisor that's not just accepting you because, you know, you're available, but accepting you because you resonate with them, their culture, but also you've got the financing to get through that gritty first year. I think that's the other myth. It's franchisors, you know, really making sure that the franchisee understands that first year is a tough year because you're building the business. Most franchises will have an element of business development.
That's that is very true.
It's very rare that people, you know, even if you've got a store where people are walking in, you still need to market it and present yourself within the community. So I think that's the bit where people go, that will just happen. But as we know, it's all about building relationship in the community.
Yeah. And are there, you know, any tips that you can give to franchisors that are starting? I mean, you know, reading lists or anything, you know, what would you consume if you were a franchisor? If you had to go back to yourself at, you know, 25 years old and you're about to start a franchising business, you know, as a franchisor, what would you say to yourself?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of all the American authors. So I think Street Smart, franchising, all that stuff is great. Anything from the Franchise Performance Group in the States is very, very good because they're great practitioners. And you know, there's so many, there's lots of white papers like on franchise recruitment and franchise development and stuff like that. And of course, the Americans are very, very good on the psychology. They're very, very good.
It's actually a really important part of it.
I think in franchising, it's everything.
And
of course, you know, I would always. I think I met Greg Nathan years ago when he first did Profitable Partnerships at a Melbourne franchise show.
Wow.
And obviously he's a psychologist by trade. So I would recommend, you know, they do a very, very good boot camp for field managers of how to deal with, how to work with franchisees and to work through problems because you're going to have problems within the relationship. So anything by Greg Nathan is excellent, and I think the courses are very good.
And that's fantastic. And actually, Profitable Partnerships, you put me on that early doors, and it was just phenomenal, really, wasn't it? Really quite just a textbook, you know, on this is how to do it and do it well.
And it's also just understanding, you know, that when someone's put in their life savings into the business, that as a franchisor, you have a responsibility. And you know, telling people what to do is you know, so your listening skills have to really sharpen as a franchisor. I think that's probably the biggest tip is to deeply listen to what's going on. Not on the surface here. Let's say, you know, they're falling behind on royalty payments, but really what's underneath it. You know, and working with compassion, but also making sure that you maintain the brand and that you're looking after everyone's investment within the franchise network.
Absolutely. And I think that's the really hard part as a franchisor, you know, just making that decision, sometimes that very awkward decision, but it's the right thing for the network. And, you know, and sometimes you're doing it, as you were saying, thinking, looking around the corner, but can be quite a painful thing to do at that time. So I hear that.
And I think that's leadership. And of course, they're looking at you as the leader. They're going to be leading as you lead within their branches. Because as much as franchisors are leaders, each of their, especially in your sector, in home care, you know, there might be, you know, 100 people in that business. So, you know, the culture and the leadership is everything.
And just speaking sort of brass tacks, what would you say a new franchisor needs in terms of capital in order to get off the ground?
Gosh, that's a great question, and again, it will vary on sector.
Yeah.
It will vary on what the franchise fee is, and also what the requirements of the franchisor are for capital. So, you really need to do a proper scale up over 5 years with the number of franchisees, and tie that into the franchisor P&L.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, you know, a minimum of 100, 200,000. It depends on the sector.
Yeah.
But you know, coming in with 50, 60,
It's not going to cut it.
It's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
And that actually, you know, is one of the critical failure points, is that people then rely on one portal or one franchise show to make it work. And then it doesn't work as well. They get 1 or 2 franchisees, and then they turn their back on the industry because they haven't been well funded in the beginning.
Yeah.
Or indeed they haven't taken advice, you know, and also embedded themselves within the franchise community.
And that's so true, I think, isn't it? I mean, it's so. And we're here talking about exhibitions and so on. We're here today at we don't want to get run over. We're here today at the British and International Franchise Show and Exhibition at Olympia.
Yeah.
So very excited about that. You know, I think it's always quite fun, you know, as well.
Yeah.
I think the buzz is there, and I think the kind of community spirit really comes out in Mounds.
And also, you know, you just learn from other franchisors what's going on. I think also, you know, for people walking in, it's a life changer.
Totally.
You know, not for everyone. You know, as you know, you talk to a lot of candidates, and you know, they might not be the right fit or not have the capital, but you know, for many people, it's a complete change.
It's quite amazing, actually.
I think
the power of it.
That's right, and I think we've both had experiences where it becomes someone's come in and left a job, and they come in and they're shaky in the first year, and then suddenly year 2 starts to pick up. And I think that's the real kick for me, is just seeing that the way they develop, and you know, and it also, they can, you know, earn certainly more than they ever would.
And Simon, just before we wrap up then today, one piece of advice that you would give our listeners, you know, something actionable advice that they can do, you know, today, this week, right now, to reach their goal of being a successful entrepreneur.
Oh, absolutely. Find someone in your local network who you can be accountable to every day.
Fantastic.
Yep.
That is great.
It's the only way to do it, and be very, very specific in what you want to get done each day.
Nice. That is fantastic. Thank you very much, Simon. There you go. And thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you, Amrit. Cheers.
Bye-bye.